everybody, let's talk about how to answer the job interview question, what is your dream job? This is a pretty common job interview question, and it's actually another form of the strengths question. One of the most common job interview questions you're ever going to encounter is them asking you, what are your strengths? And as I mentioned in the past, that question has been rephrased so many times. For example, instead of saying, what are your strengths? They could say, why should we hire you? Okay, or why do you want this job? You answer all those questions the same because it's the same question. You basically give them what you have and how what you have lines up with the requirements of the job. So this question, what is your dream job, is yet another form of that, okay? And the way to answer this question is to give them an answer to describe a job that's extremely close to the job that they're interviewing you for. It's just that simple, okay? So they say, what is your dream job? And you describe a job that's very similar to the job they're interviewing you for. A wrong answer, conversely, would be if they say, what is your dream job? And you describe something that's totally different from the job that they're interviewing you for. That tends to suggest you're not a fit, okay? Because it's a dream job, so it tends to be a desirable job. And if you want to do a job that's completely different to the one they're interviewing for, chances are you're not going to work out. Okay? And chances are also you're perhaps not suited for the job they're interviewing for. So whichever way you slice it, it's a bad answer. Okay? Now, if you were to analyze what I just said, they're actually probing for two things. They're probing for, are you qualified for the job? And they're probing for, do you want the job? Is this something you would be happy doing? Okay. And if we look at this article here, this article that appeared in thebalancedcareers.com, which actually is not a bad article, unlike a lot of articles online that give you advice for how to pass a job interview. This one is actually not bad. If you look at it closely, they zero in on both those things, okay? So right here where it says what the interviewer really wants to know, they outline two things. You're looking for the right skills to be successful in the job, so they want to see if you have the right skills, and they're also assessing your motivation, okay, right there. So those are the two things they're probing for. Okay, so as I said, the correct answer is to describe a job very similar to the one that they're hiring you for, okay? Now, if we go down this article and we see if it's worth its salt, we go down and it says here what to mention in your response. Okay. Now, they bring up a very good point, which is company culture. Now, the problem that you face when asked this question is that you know what they posted in the job ad. Okay. So you saw a job ad and you responded to it and you applied for the job. And in the job ad, it listed the requirements they were looking for. So they were looking for a candidate that had, say, certain education, certain skills, and perhaps certain personality traits. Okay, so you know that much. But what you don't know, usually, is you don't know the company culture, okay? You've never been in that organization before, so you don't know exactly what things they tend to value and what things they don't, okay? Different organizations have different cultures, and culture simply means the way they do things, okay? Different organizations tend to value different things. They tend to have different expectations of people, and things like this. Now, you don't know that. I mean, unless say you're a previous employee or something, you will not know that. So, in order to say the right type of thing, what can be very helpful for this question is if you have done your homework, if you have researched the company and you have a little bit of an idea of how this company does things, okay? So, because, for example, you can guess as to what they might be looking for in terms of qualities, skills, and traits, but you don't know for sure. Okay, and if it's not written in the job ad, you're just guessing. So the way organizations usually do this is that they write some of the requirements they're looking for in the job ad, they're explicitly stated, but then others are kept hidden intentionally. And that is so that they can make an honest assessment of whether the candidate is, in their view, the right fit. Okay? So that leaves this open to a certain amount of risk, okay? And we're going to talk about that in a bit. Okay, now, there is a section in here that I think is particularly good. It says here, what not to mention in your response. Okay, the conventional wisdom is to not mention specific job titles. So if they say, what is your dream job? You don't say assistant manager of the plant, or something like that. You instead of naming the job, you describe the type of job based on the skills you would need, the duties you end up taking on, and the traits you would have to excel in that role and to enjoy it. Okay? If you give specific job titles, it starts to seem more of a fake answer because in reality, job titles vary. And, for something like manager, that can mean a whole kaleidoscope of different things. So for that reason, they would prefer that you describe it, and then they can really zero in on what exactly you would like to do. Okay, now another red flag that you don't want to do when they ask this question is this, and I tend to agree with this: ambitious functions. So if they say, what's your dream job? And you say, oh, CEO, when you're being interviewed for a supervisor role. Okay, now supervisor and CEO are generally very far apart. There's generally a huge difference between those two roles in terms of responsibility and function. I think a lot of candidates make the assumption that if they appear to be ambitious, that will be viewed as a good thing. Okay, it has a certain amount of logic. You don't want someone that has absolutely no ambition and no drive. Okay, so that makes sense. However, what you've got to keep in mind is that the hiring managers or the recruiters are looking to fill this position. They're not looking to hire somebody who's going to be immediately unsatisfied with this particular job and will want to be promoted almost immediately. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking for someone who will be content in the job that they're interviewing for. Okay? So that's going to be a big factor here. Okay? Now, the other thing is that, like it says here, if they say, what's your dream job? And you say, this job. Okay? That seems fake and strange, and it kind of nullifies this whole question. Okay? So don't do any of these. Okay? Don't give a specific job title. Don't say this job. And don't say something extremely ambitious that would tend to suggest you wouldn't be happy in the role that they're hiring you for. Okay, so that's one thing I'll say. Now, they have some examples down here. Okay, and what's interesting about these examples, I'm not going to read all these examples, but what's interesting about them is that they tend to focus on skills. Okay, so skills is, hopefully you know what skills are. I mean, skills are something that you know how to do. It's a capability. Okay, that's different from traits. Traits is something, it's like a characteristic of your personality. Okay, and that's different from skills. Now, a lot of these answers focus on skills. Okay, like saying, for example, my dream job is something where I get to work with people. I help to solve people's problems, and I get to see the impact that I make. I get to see the smile on their face when I solve their problem and delight them, and that really makes me feel like I'm making a difference. And as a result, a job that allows me to do that would be something I would thoroughly enjoy. If you were to talk about that, I mean, that makes sense. You're talking about skills, but this also speaks to traits, okay? So you could talk about traits, you could talk about skills, and in some of these examples, like this one here, you make a statement like the one I just did, but then you give an example. So this person here is saying, for example, in my last job, I did this and I had this impact, and then, I enjoyed it. Okay? So you can do that. It's not necessary, but if you really want to reinforce something, that can help. Okay? But you would only be able to do that if you've worked in a situation that's, I guess, close to your dream job before. Okay, if you haven't done that, it's not necessary that you give an example. Okay, now it says, what are your work? They talk about follow-up questions here, but that's basically the end of the article. So, yeah, this is essentially a form of what are your strengths, but instead of speaking automatically to the qualifications that were listed in the job ad, it requires a bit of guesswork as to what they might be looking for. Okay? Now, if you don't know either way, if you don't have any, if you haven't done a ton of research on the organization that's interviewing you, and you don't know their culture, my recommendation would be to stick to things that you do know that were listed explicitly in the job requirements. Okay, speak to those. If you do have a good idea of how the organization works and what their culture is, what traits they value in people. For example, some organizations don't really, like I said, they don't really care about people who are ambitious. They don't really prioritize people's promotion up the ranks as, you know, a part of their career at that company. Whereas other organizations do. Other organizations even put time limits on it and say, if you're not promoted within 2 years, then you're not working out. Okay. So it really varies by culture. Now, if you do know the culture, okay, and you do understand what's important to that company, and you know this to a high degree of certainty, then I would suggest talking about traits and talking about things that tie in with that organization's culture. Okay. So if you know what they like, say it. If you don't, then simply stick to the posted job requirements and speak to those, and use those as your guide to constructing a good answer to this question. Now, the other thing, I'm just going to conclude by saying here that you might have guessed by now, just from my answer to this, that I'm advising you in such a way that's going to give you, it's going to maximize your chances of passing this interview question. Okay. A lot of articles online are written from the perspective of making the recruiter's job easier. Okay. And helping them to do their job, as opposed to helping you to maximize your chances of getting the job. Okay. And this question is a prime example. You know, a lot of articles will tell you, just answer honestly, answer truthfully, you know, tell the recruiter, you know, who you really are, what you really want. Well, that's good for the recruiter. Okay. They get a window into you, but that's not the best answer for you, because that's a very risky answer for you. If you start talking off the top of your head and being open and honest about exactly what you're going for, regardless of what you know about the company and what you know about this job, it's a very risky answer. You can easily say something that convinces them that you are not a fit for the role. So I would advise against that. I would advise on playing it safe, giving them what they've said they're looking for, and results tend to show that works. Okay, so that would be what I'd advise for this. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Thank you very much for listening. You guys are awesome. And don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you on the next video. Take care.